All right, it was my intention today to show you how to bleed brakes, but I ordered brake fluid a week and a half ago and it still hadn't got here yet. It's supposed to get here tomorrow. Just wonderful. But I scrounged around the shop, found some brake fluid, but the brake fluid I have is all 10 years old. The brake fluid that's in this truck is black. It needs changing, but I'm not going to put 10-year-old fluid in it. Reason being is brake fluid is hygroscopic. It soaks up moisture, and when it does, the boiling point drops. Now this stuff's probably bottomed out in boiling point. The other fluid probably is a little bit better, but it's not worth the time and effort to put old brake fluid in here. So instead, I'm going to show you how I do some of these things without actually doing it. First off, when you're bleeding, yeah, that's a tongue twister. When you're bleeding brake fluid, you want to make sure you got the right type of fluid for the vehicle. Newer cars, look in your owner's manual, see what it came with. That's important. You have .3, .4, .5, and .5.1. .5 is not compatible with any other brake fluid. .3, .4, and .5.1 are, you can mix them, but don't do that. Stick with whatever your vehicle came with if you can, in any way. So, if you look in here, I've used this before. There's a couple holes punched there. I didn't pull the seal off. I punched holes. Reason being, I'm going to put this cap back on just for display purposes. You pull this cap off, you have those two holes punched there. You invert your can like that, and when the fluid drops below the level of those holes, your fluid will come out of here into the reservoir, but it won't fall unless there's air to replace the fluid that's coming out. It's a simple physics trick that you can use to your advantage. You put this brake fluid bottle on, inverted on your reservoir with the holes punched in there, and you don't have to watch it other than to make sure that this doesn't get empty. If this empties out and you start losing fluid in your reservoir, it's time to stop what you're doing, get a new can and put it on here. If you're bleeding your brakes and at any point you suck air, you're starting over. You've got to go back to the back corner and bleed again until you get all the bubbles out. We fought that issue at Sebring last year. BMWs, I know, and some other vehicles have a little cup inside the reservoir. And if you have it sitting there to refill, it won't refill as fast as you're pumping that pedal. So if you have a cup in there, pull it out, then put your fluid bottle on. We went through three little bottles of brake fluid, and we couldn't get the air out of the lines. And then we figured out the guy who was watching the thing hadn't pulled the cup out. And no fault of his, he didn't know. But once we pulled the cup out, we were able to bleed the brakes correctly. And we bought all the brake fluid they had there at the track, and we were on the last bottle and finally got it to bleed clean. So be aware of that. So, and you'll have, basically you're just gonna leave, you're gonna check your bottle every you get done with the rear tire. Check your fluid, make sure you got plenty of fluid left. Go to the next tire, bleed that wheel, and then go on and on until you get up to the front. Now your order of bleeding, you're going to start at that back. You're going to start at the master cylinder you're going to start at the caliper or brake cylinder that's furthest away from the master cylinder. That far back corner is where you start, and then you're going to move to the other back side. And then you're going to move up here to the front, to the side opposite the master cylinder, and the last wheel you bleed is this one down here. Now, if you've just changed your master cylinder, you have to bleed it before you even start. You have to bench bleed it. It's a pain in the butt, but you have to do it. You got to do it first before you install that master cylinder. It won't self-bleed very well. You'll go through a ton of fluid before you get blood on the vehicle. Another trick I have here, when we bleed the brakes at the track, we use a one-man brake bleeder. And you don't have to. You can do the old method of having one person in the driver's seat and the other person in the back doing the open, close routine. And we do that, but we still use a brake bleeder. This is my homemade brake bleeder. Old paste pecani sauce jar. I use this because it's tapered and I could put a hanger on it. You want an inch or two of fluid in the bottom. You're gonna have your hose come in and go down to the bottom. You can see here I actually used a brass fitting and some steel tubing, and I run that down right down near the bottom. But at the track, we make brake bleeders all the time out of Gatorade bottles and vacuum hose and zip ties. You take the Gatorade bottle, you punch a hole in the top big enough for the hose to go into. You don't want it airtight. You want a little bit of a gap there. You run the hose through the lid, and then you zip tie it under the lid and over the lid so the hose can't move in and out. And having that air gap means that when you pump the brakes, the air and the air bubbles and the fluid go out, but there's room for the pressure to return. You can see on this, I have a hole punched in the cap to let out the air pressure off whenever I pump the brakes in. So I can hang this, up there near the brake, and I've got a short section hose where I can hit the little bleeder, and that's how I bleed brakes by myself at home. I go back there, I stick this on there, then I crack the nipple loose, come up to the driver's seat and pump the pedal. Some people insist that you have to have the engine running to bleed brakes. You don't. It helps. It really helps. But if you got strong enough legs, you can bleed it by yourself without the engine running. It's not going to hurt anything. So, but yeah, I pump the brakes, go back. I'll pump it about 10 times. And, if you've just done some major maintenance and you got a lot of air in the lines, you're going to pump it a lot more than 10 times. But usually I'm just trying to, just make sure the brakes are clean, maybe cycle some fluid out. So pump it 10 times, check, see where you're at. If you need to, pump it 10 more times. If you can see it, or if you can have somebody watch it for you, basically what you're watching for, whenever you pump the brake pedal and no bubbles come out in here, that's when you know you've got it bled. And you want to get that for like 3 or 4 pumps straight. You want to see no air bubbles. And if you get to that point, then you're usually good to go on bleeding your brakes. A little more on brake fluid. I've got this old can of Super Blue race fluid, and it's .4, and it's blue. Stuff's illegal. Did you know that? And it was illegal back when I bought it, but it hadn't got cracked down on yet. ATE was making this stuff with the blue coloring, and the standard by law says it can't be colored, it's got to be clear. And so the government made ATE quit selling this in the United States, which is a shame because it's awesome brake fluid. They made it in blue and in clear, and so if you were bleeding a brake system, you could, if you had clear fluid, you'd buy the blue fluid and you would pump it through until you saw blue and you knew that you had your system pumped. And then next time you had to bleed your brakes, you'd go in with the clear fluid and you'd pump it until the fluid came out clear. Made it really easy to know when you've done a complete brake fluid change. This fluid here is black, so no matter what you do, you're waiting until you see clear fluid. So it wouldn't have been a big issue there. But I've still got this jug. I think it's been opened. But it is a racing fluid, and so it's got a higher boiling point. The boiling point is 538 degrees Fahrenheit. And then if you let it age for years and years, the fluid, the boiling point drops to 388 degrees, which is still pretty significant. I think this one's, I can't read this without my glasses. I think it's 400 degrees. So this wet is almost like this dry. But I'm not sure that I'm ever going to use this. Let's check and see if this has been opened. Oh, it has. So more than likely, I'm probably not going to use this fluid because I know it's at least 10 years old. 10 years ago, I think, is about when they stopped selling it. So just a little more on brake fluid there. I have some Wilwood brake fluid somewhere. High dollar, 570 degree Wilwood brake fluid. It's even a little bit better than this stuff. And I can't find it. I'm not sure which shelf I put it on, but I'm not finding it. So I'm going to have to give this truck to my sister-in-law with the old brake fluid in it and tell her, hey, sometime the next year, get your brake fluid changed. There are some other issues. I did get underneath the truck, and I added a pint of transmission fluid to it. It's still not quite shifting right. The transmission may be on its way out. I think this is a temporary vehicle. This vehicle's never, nobody's going to spend the time and money to make this as beautiful a truck as it was when it was new. So hopefully it serves her for a few years, though, and gets her to the next vehicle.